Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into something fundamental, something that touches almost everyone. We're tackling this huge idea, maybe even a myth, in health and self-improvement. The whole concept of willpower. You know how it is. We all have these labels for ourselves, right? Like, oh, I'm just not a morning person, or I have such a sweet tooth. Maybe I need that deadline pressure to get anything done. I mean, we say these things, these preferences that, let's be honest, probably drives most of our day-to-day choices almost like they're built in, fixed,
Right.
like having brown eyes or being left-handed. They feel like part of our basic architecture. But what if that's not quite right? What if those daily choices, the ones steering your health, your mood, your whole life path aren't coming from some fixed inner you? What if they're actually more like conditioned responses, shaped, maybe entirely, by the constant quiet hum of your surroundings?
That's exactly the shift in perspective we need to explore today. We're suggesting moving the spotlight away from the individual person making the choice and shining it instead onto the structure that shapes those choices available to them. Our source material for this deep dive is really fascinating. It's a detailed, evidence-based framework put together by VitaChoice Ltd folks named Benny, Dawn, and Claude led that work, and it was specifically designed for community leaders, policymakers, people thinking about health on a larger scale. And their core idea, well, it's pretty radical, but also quite simple when you break it down. To get to real, lasting health and well-being, we probably need to stop leaning so heavily on individual willpower, that resource that feels like it runs out by lunchtime. Instead, the focus should be on consciously building environments, environmental conditioning that automatically, structurally support healthy habits. So the mission for you listening is to really grasp this architecture of choice deeply and thoroughly.
Okay, let's unpack that. Environmental conditioning. Sounds a bit abstract. Let's make it concrete. The source material actually gives a great real-world example, a story about one of the developers, Dawn, and her journey with spicy food.
Yeah, the document lays it out. Dawn grew up somewhere in a family where pretty much every meal had a significant amount of spice. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, always hot. Now, the easy assumption is, okay, she just grew up liking it, right? Born with it.
Apparently not. The source is clear. Initially, it was, well, she hated it. It was torture for her, caused tears, actual distress. She really struggled with every bite. Her biology was basically screaming, no.
But here's the absolute key part, the mechanism we're talking about.
Yeah.
The source says there was no escape. This wasn't like, trying spicy food on holiday sometimes. This was constant. Relentless, maybe, but also gentle, persistent influence. Just total immersion in that one way of eating.
Exactly. The environment offered zero alternatives. It was, in effect, a perfect little conditioning chamber for her palate. So it wasn't a conscious decision. She didn't wake up one day and say, right, today I learned to love chili.
No, not at all. It was pure environmental conditioning in action. And the change wasn't sudden. It was slow, subtle, happening over years, almost without her noticing moment to moment.
And the result? Fast forward to today.
Well, what once caused pain slowly shifted, first to tolerance, then preference, then actual pleasure. And now, the document states, she genuinely feels a meal isn't complete without that spice. Her environment completely rewired her internal preference.
That's a powerful illustration. We think our preferences define us, but maybe they're just the echoes of where we've been, what we've been immersed in. We become what surrounds us, especially if it's consistent.
Precisely. It really underscores that idea. Our environment shapes us constantly.
Okay, so that's the practical example. Persistent immersion, changing someone fundamentally. How does this story connect to the harder science, the established principles underpinning this whole VitaChoice model?
That bridge is built on the scientific principle of resonance and synchronization. To really get how our environments can sort of pull us along or hold us back, we actually need to jump back in time, way back, over 350 years, to 1665, and a Dutch scientist named Christian Huygens.
Huygens, right, the clock guy. Wasn't he sick in bed or something?
Yeah, that's the story. Confined to his room, and he notices these two pendulum clocks he had hanging on the same wall. The key thing was they started off swinging differently, out of sync, doing their own thing.
But then,
After about half an hour, he observed something amazing. Without anyone touching them, they had fallen into perfect, synchronized rhythm, swinging exactly together.
wow, just on their own.
Just on their own. He was apparently so struck by it, this spontaneous self-organization, that he called it the sympathy of two clocks, which is quite a poetic way to put it.
It is. And the secret wasn't some magic in the clocks themselves.
No, not in the gears or the individual pendulum's energy. The secret, the source material emphasizes, was the shared structure they were hanging on. That simple wooden beam connecting them on the wall.
Ah, the beam. So the beam was like transmitting something between them?
Exactly. It acted as a conductor. It transmitted these tiny, almost invisible vibrations back and forth between the clocks. And through that shared connection, they naturally settled into their most stable, most energy-efficient state, which was perfect synchronization.
Hmm.
It wasn't effort. It was physics. An inevitable alignment because of the shared structure.
Okay, I see the connection now. That's a fantastic metaphor. So how does that jump from 17th century clocks to, well, to us, to human behavior?
Well, what's really fascinating here is that this phenomenon, which we now understand better through things like complex systems theory, it applies directly to humans. We synchronize too, just like those pendulums. Our shared environment, think about your office, your home, your neighborhood, your social circle that acts as our wooden meme. It's constantly transmitting influences, habits, moods, rhythms, expectations, and that causes a natural resonance among the people within it.
Okay, so it's not just a metaphor, it's an actual mechanism. The source gives some examples to make this really clear, right?
It does, and they're quite compelling. Three main ones. First, think about applause in a large venue. It always starts kind of messy, doesn't it? Random clapping all over the place.
Yeah, chaotic.
But then, almost inevitably, within seconds, it falls into this single, unified rhythm. Why? Because the shared sound environment, the acoustics of the room, acts as the beam, synchronizing everyone.
Huh, I never thought about it that way. Okay, what else?
Second example comes from nature. Fireflies. You see them in summer, maybe in a forest or a field. They start blinking totally randomly, all different timings.
Right.
But give it a little while, and soon thousands of them could be flashing in perfect unison. It's incredible to watch. They're responding to the shared visual environment, the light pulses of their neighbors synchronizing through that shared beam.
Wow. Okay, clocks, applause, fireflies. And the third one hits closer to home.
It does. This is maybe the most directly relevant for our discussion today. Why do people who live together, partners, families, even roommates, tend to develop similar habits over time?
You mean like starting to talk alike or wanting dinner at the same time?
Exactly. Similar speech patterns, converging sleep schedules, even adopting similar ways of relaxing or similar food preferences. They are essentially pendulums sharing the same domestic beam, the routines, the subtle influences, the shared space, and they naturally start to resonate.
That's powerful. It really shifts the focus, doesn't it? It takes this idea of self-improvement out of the realm of, I need more willpower, I need to be stronger, and puts it squarely into, well, architectural design, social design.
Right.
I need a better structure around me.
Precisely. The environment is doing the heavy lifting, transmitting the rhythm.
Okay, so let's take this science of synchronization and apply it directly to public health, to the suffering people experience. The source material lays out a really clear chain of causation, tracing problems back to their root. Can you walk us through that? It starts with the suffering itself.
Right, it works backward. So we start with the outcome. Suffering, physical, mental, doesn't matter. Why are people suffering? The force suggests it often stems from repeated unhealthy choices.
Okay, suffering comes from bad choices. Why the bad choices?
Well, why do people consistently make choices they know aren't good for them? Often it's because their understanding is maybe incomplete or skewed, or maybe they just have decision fatigue. Too many choices, too much stress.
Makes sense. And where does that flawed understanding come from?
That traces back to their learning. And crucially, the source defines learning not just as reading a book, but as the constant repetitive input you get from your surroundings. It's learning through immersion.
And that learning environment is shaped by?
The environment itself. So the full chain looks like this. Suffering, choices, understanding, learning, environment.
Wow. So when you follow it back like that.
The conclusion becomes pretty hard to avoid. Persistent health problems, both physical and mental, don't just spring from a lack of individual willpower at the choice stage. They originate much further back in the environmental conditioning that shapes our understanding and dictates what we learn through constant, often unconscious, immersion. Just like Dawn learning to love spice through sheer, inescapable exposure.
So this really highlights the core problem, particularly as the source notes for many people today, maybe specifically mentioning Australians in the document. We've had decades of health campaigns, right? Telling people to eat better, move more. Intellectually, most people know what they should do. They often want to make those healthier choices.
Absolutely. The knowledge isn't usually the bottleneck anymore, but the environment they live and work in actively fights against those intentions. Their home setup might be full of easy, unhealthy snacks. The office culture might revolve around sedentary work and catered lunches. Their social life might center on activities that undermine health goals. The sheer convenience and availability of unhealthy options versus healthy ones.
It's like the environment is constantly sending out the wrong vibrations.
That's a perfect way to put it, bringing back Huygens. It's like you're a pendulum, desperately trying to swing with a healthy rhythm, eating well, exercising using pure willpower. But the being you're attached to, the actual structure of your daily life, is vibrating powerfully with older, stronger, unhealthy patterns.
And it just pulls you back. Every time. You can resist for a while, but the structure wins.
Exactly. And we need to be clear why willpower alone is often doomed in this scenario. Psychologically, willpower draws on our executive function, primarily managed by the prefrontal cortex. There's this concept called ego depletion.
Ego depletion sounds draining.
It is. Think of it like a muscle or a battery. Every time you make a conscious effort to resist temptation, saying no to the cake, forcing yourself to go to the gym, fighting the urge to procrastinate, you're using up that finite mental energy.
And by the end of the day,
That resource is often depleted. You're tired. And what happens then? You revert to the easiest path, the default setting, which is usually your deeply ingrained, environmentally conditioned habit. The struggle isn't a sign of weak character. It's a predictable outcome of fighting a structural disadvantage.
which logically leads to the big question. If willpower isn't enough, if fighting the beam is mostly futile, what's the alternative? What kind of support structure do people need? How do you build the right beam?
And that's precisely where this organization mentioned in the source material, VitaChoice Ltd., comes in. They've developed this specific approach they call their resonant community model.
Resonant community model. Okay.
Their entire purpose, their core promise, is essentially to be that right beam, to intentionally design and build a resonant environment, a proper support structure where healthy choices become the path of least resistance, not the uphill battle.
So they're not just giving out advice or brochures.
No, they recognize that's largely ineffective against strong environmental conditioning. Their approach is about creating that deep, persistent, positive immersion, building the structure first.
How do they do that? The model must be quite detailed.
It's very comprehensive. It's designed specifically for people who lack that supportive environment naturally. It's built on 5 key pillars, working together to create this synchronized collective wellness.
Okay, let's go through these 5 pillars, because understanding them really shows the level of commitment needed to actually be the beam, not just talk about it. What's the first one?
The first pillar is fundamental, living together. This provides the physical basis for synchronization. Just like Huygens's clocks needed to be on the same wall, sharing physical space ensures constant, unavoidable exposure to the same basic rhythm, the same daily schedule, the same food environment, the same routines. It immediately cuts down on conflicting signals from outside environments.
That makes sense. It avoids that moment, say 8 p.m., you get home tired, fridge is empty, takeout apps are calling. If you're in the supportive environment, that temptation is structurally minimized.
Precisely. Pillar number 2 is learning together. And this isn't just classroom learning. It's described as daily, evidence-based conditioning. It's about constant, shared immersion in practical health knowledge and positive behavioral patterns, reinforced by the fact that everyone around you is learning and doing it too. Repetition plus community.
Okay, living together, learning together. What's third?
Third is shaping together. This moves beyond just absorbing information. It emphasizes mutual influence. The community itself becomes an active force, gently but consistently shaping each individual's behavior towards health. It leverages that powerful human need for belonging, social pressure, but used constructively to reinforce the new healthy rhythm.
Right, using peer influence positively. And the fourth pillar sounds crucial, especially thinking back to Gon's story, eating together.
Absolutely critical. This isn't just about saving time on cooking, though that might be a side benefit. It's the practical, daily, hands-on reconditioning of dietary habits. It's where the theory hits the plate, literally.
So, meal after meal.
Meal after meal, day after day, healthy foods are the norm. They're prepared, ideally simply and appealingly, and importantly, enjoyed communally. This relentless shared experience helps break down those old neural pathways tied to unhealthy eating and build new ones. It aims to make the healthy choice feel inevitable, satisfying, not like a punishment.
Okay, that covers food, and the fifth pillar brings it all together.
Yes, the fifth is changing together. This really captures the overall goal, achieving synchronized wellness. It's about shifting from that lonely, exhausting feeling of being the only one trying to swim against the current to a state of collective harmony. Change becomes supported, shared, visible in others, and therefore feels much more natural and achievable.
So those are the pillars, the what. But how do they actually do it? A model needs practical methods, right?
Right.
The source mentions 4 key principles for putting this into action.
That's right. Principles that ensure the resonant structure isn't just a nice idea, but actually functions day to day. The first is clear communication. We talked about conditioning needing persistent input. Well, that input has to be easy to understand.
No complex jargon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Simple, memorable information. Prioritizing health literacy that's genuinely accessible to everyone, avoiding the kind of scientific language that often just confuses or intimidates people and stops them from applying things in real life.
Makes sense. Principle 2.
Daily conditioning. This is about that consistent, gentle pressure, like the beam transmitting vibrations. It's ensuring the pendulums are nudged into rhythm consistently. This means providing continuous guidance, support, and opportunities for repetition until new, healthy patterns move from being effortful decisions to automatic habits.
Okay, clear communication, daily conditioning. Third.
Practical community living. This anchors everything in reality. It's taking the knowledge off the page and embedding it into the fabric of daily life in the kitchen, in shared activities, maybe in a community garden, group walks. Everything from how meals are planned and prepared to daily schedules happens within that resonant structure. It's lived, immersive, 247, minimizing those counter pressures from outside.
So it's not theoretical, it's deeply practical. And the 4th principle sounds like the real game changer.
It really is. Focus on well-being, not willpower. This is the philosophical core. It's a conscious commitment to designing the environment so that individual effort, that finite willpower, becomes increasingly irrelevant for basic healthy choices.
How does that work in practice?
By making the healthy choice the easy, obvious, socially reinforced option. If nutritious food is readily available, simple to prepare, and what everyone else is eating, you don't need much willpower to choose it. If gentle movement is built into the daily routine and done socially, it requires less push. The goal is that eventually, making healthy choices feels as natural and effortless as breathing. Willpower is bypassed by design.
Okay, I can see how that framework is powerful. But listening to this, someone might think, well, it sounds a bit intense. Living together, shaping together, daily conditioning, that no escape element from Dawn's story. Doesn't it risk feeling a bit controlling or overly rigid? How does the model handle individual autonomy within this collective harmony?
That's a really important point, and the source material seems aware of that potential perception. The way it's framed is crucial. The environment is intended as supportive architecture, not as a set of restrictive rules imposed by an authority.
So it's scaffolding, not a cage.
Exactly. The community is built around shared principles derived from evidence, things everyone agrees contribute to well-being, rather than someone's personal dogma. The autonomy piece comes in the conscious choice to join that environment, to step onto that beam because you want the outcome it facilitates. Once you're within that structure, the physics of synchronization, the social reinforcement, they start to work naturally. The idea is that the change feels less like being forced and more like being carried along joyfully, because you're succeeding, you're feeling better, and you're doing it alongside others. The struggle is removed by the environment.
Okay, that clarifies the dynamic. The choice shifts from the moment-to-moment battle of wills to the upfront decision about the environment itself, which leads us perfectly into the 2 core truths that VitaChoice identifies, truths that really aim to reshape how we think about change altogether.
Yes, 2 fundamental takeaways from their research and model. Truth 1. Change isn't about willpower. We've sort of built the case for this already, drawing on the science and the psychology.
The pendulums don't try harder.
Exactly. They don't grit their teeth and force synchronization. They just need the right shared structure, the right beam. And the argument is, humans are fundamentally the same in this regard. We don't necessarily need more lectures about trying harder. We need better designed environmental supports.
And the implications of that, especially thinking about public health policy, are massive, aren't they? For decades, it feels like the focus has been almost entirely on individual responsibility. Eat less, move more, it's up to you. If you fail, it's your fault.
Right. And this model argues that's not just ineffective, it's potentially unfair. It ignores the power of the environment. The force strongly advocates for a significant shift in public resources and policy focus, away from solely blending or educating the individual, and towards actively designing and investing in supportive community structures and environments. Environmental design is a primary health intervention.
Which brings us to the second core truth. If change isn't about willpower,
Then truth, too, is isolated change is hard. Resonant change is natural. When you try to change alone, swimming against the current of your existing environment, it's incredibly difficult, often depleting, and usually unsustainable.
what?
But when you place yourself within a healthy, resonant community, when you're one of several pendulums swinging together on a supportive beam, the whole dynamic shifts. Change stops feeling like a constant, draining battle. It becomes more natural, more supported, maybe even joyful. And crucially, the model suggests it becomes almost inevitable, because the path of least resistance now aligns with well-being.
It's the difference between fighting gravity and using it.
That's a great analogy. And this whole shift from willpower to structural support isn't just philosophical. It has a very real, observable scientific basis in how our brains work. Neuroplasticity.
Right, let's get into the how at the brain level. Because just saying the environment changes you isn't enough. What's actually happening neurologically when someone is in one of these resonant communities?
Well, the foundational idea of neuroplasticity is that our brains aren't fixed structures. They're constantly adapting, rewiring themselves based on the input they receive, the experiences we have. There's that famous saying in neuroscience, neurons that fire together, wire together.
Meaning the pathways we use more often get stronger?
Exactly. If your daily environment constantly bombards you with cues for stress, unhealthy food, isolation, and sedentary behavior, the neural pathways associated with those responses become deeply ingrained, like well-worn grooves. Your brain literally becomes physically conditioned to react in those ways. It becomes the default.
So how does the resonant community model interrupt that?
It works by systematically changing the input. By immersing the individual in an environment that consistently provides different cues for movement, social connection, nutritious food, calm pickup, it forces new neural pathways to fire repeatedly.
The healthy habit pathways.
Precisely. Pathways associated with planning healthy meals, engaging in group activities, managing stress constructively. Through constant, repetitive, positive stimulation within that supportive environment, these new pathways get strengthened. They become the new grooves. The brain physically rewires itself, making the healthy choices the new automatic default, the path of least resistance neurologically.
So by consciously choosing the environment, the beam, we're essentially using architectural and social design as a tool for neurological engineering. We're not just trying to overlay good habits on a resistant brain. We're changing the brain's operating system itself.
That's a very accurate way to describe the underlying mechanism. It's a much deeper, more sustainable approach than relying on the temporary fix of willpower.
And the structural approach, moving from blaming individuals to redesigning systems, clearly has huge potential impacts. The source material outlines implications across several key areas for society, particularly thinking about Australia again. Let's touch on those. First, public health.
The potential here is enormous. This model offers a tangible, scalable strategy for tackling the rising tide of chronic lifestyle-related diseases, things like type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular issues, obesity, which place a massive burden on the healthcare system.
It's about prevention, not just treatment.
Exactly. It shifts the focus upstream to prevention through environmental design. Instead of just reacting after someone gets sick, it aims to create conditions where fewer people get sick in the first place. It moves beyond pamphlets and websites to offer a built-in systemic support structure through community-based intervention, making health the default, not the exception.
And there's an equity angle too, right?
A significant one. We know that unhealthy environments often disproportionately impact lower income or more vulnerable populations. So providing access to architecturally sound, health-promoting environments could be a powerful tool for reducing health disparities and promoting social justice within healthcare.
Okay, that's public health. What about social services? The model seems to address more than just physical health.
It definitely does. One of the biggest social challenges we face globally right now is loneliness and social isolation. We're increasingly understanding that isolation is a major health risk factor in itself, comparable to smoking or obesity.
And the community model directly tackles that.
Inherently, the pillars of living together and shaping together are fundamentally about connection. By design, the model fosters shared living, intergenerational interaction, and group learning within a supportive context. It strengthens social bonds, reduces isolation-induced stress, and promotes a sense of belonging, improving mental and emotional well-being alongside physical health. It hits both targets.
Makes sense. Third area, economic sustainability. This is often the sticking point for big ideas. Is this affordable?
The argument made in the source is that, in the long run, it's far more affordable than the status quo. Prevention is almost always cheaper than treatment, especially for chronic diseases that require lifelong management. Investing in environmental conditioning that prevents illness is likely orders of magnitude more cost-effective than paying to the escalating costs of treating those illnesses after they develop.
Plus, the shared living aspect might reduce individual costs.
That's another point: raise shared resources, potentially lower housing costs per person, creating financial resilience. But the big economic win is the long-term reduction in the burden on the national healthcare system. Healthier populations require fewer expensive interventions. Fostering community resilience is presented as a sustainable investment, not just an ongoing cost.
Okay, health, social connection, economics. And the fourth implication mentioned is innovation. How is this model innovative?
Well, it's innovative in its core premise. Consciously applying the science of synchronization, Huygens' sympathy of two clocks, to community health and well-being. That's quite novel.
And it bridges different fields.
Yes, that's key to its innovation. It takes principles that might echo ancient wisdom about communal living and shared purpose, but it integrates them rigorously with modern Western science, neuroplasticity, environmental psychology, public health research. This fusion creates something new, a practical, potentially scalable, and replicable model for community development. It's presented as a tangible piece of social innovation with policy implications for how we design cities and communities.
That synthesis is really interesting. Okay, as we approach the end of this deep dive, let's try to crystallize the main takeaways for someone listening, someone trying to make sense of this big shift away from willpower. The document lists 7 key takeaways for stakeholders, but let's focus on the most impactful ones.
I think the first, absolutely crucial takeaway is the scientific foundation. We need to stress this isn't just a nice idea or a self-help trend. The model is explicitly grounded in established scientific principles: synchronization from physics, conditioning from psychology, and neuroscience. This provides a strong, objective rationale for why it should work and why it's worth investing in.
Right, it's not based on wishful thinking. And connected to that is the idea of this being a scalable model, correct?
Yes, that's vital. While it might start with individual resident communities, the design is intended to be replicable and adaptable. The learnings from these smaller-scale implementations can, and the source suggests should, inform broader policy. It's about potentially changing how government sectors approach housing, health services, urban planning, social support, using the community model as a template.
So it aims bigger than just isolated projects. And the third really crucial takeaway seems to be the social innovation aspect we just touched on.
Exactly. What makes this model stand out from many past health initiatives is its integrated nature. It's not just a diet program or an exercise plan or a social club. It's a multifaceted approach deliberately designed to tackle several major societal problems at the same time: declining physical and mental health, rising social isolation, and the need for long-term economic sustainability in healthcare. By addressing these complex issues through one unified environmental solution, it aims for synergistic impact.
Okay, scientific foundation, scalable model, social innovation. Got it. So let's bring this back to the listener. If you're out there feeling stuck, maybe blaming yourself for not having enough willpower, wrestling daily with habits in an environment that feels like it's working against you, Vita Choice, through this research, seems to be offering a really different, maybe more hopeful message.
A profoundly different message. It's essentially saying, you are not your conditioning. Yes, your environment has shaped you powerfully, but you have the capacity to become aware of those forces. And crucially, you have the capacity to make a conscious choice about the environment itself.
So the empowering question isn't the old, familiar, often guilt-ridden one: how can I try harder tomorrow?
No. The source shifts the question entirely. It becomes much more practical, more architectural, more about physics almost. Will I choose to consciously change my environment? Will I recognize the beam I'm currently on isn't serving me and deliberately seek out or help build a different one?
And Vita Choice's stated mission is basically to be that beam.
To be a beam, yes. To provide that persistent connecting structure through which healthy influence can resonate naturally. Their goal is to create these environments where, as the source puts it, suffering can transform into joy, and that draining, lonely individual struggle can become effortless, collective harmony.
It really boils down to that core insight. Conscious environmental choice is the lever. That's the real path to conditioning ourselves towards health and well-being. Just like Dawn was, perhaps unintentionally, conditioned by constant exposure to spice, the idea is we can intentionally condition ourselves towards health by choosing environments where health is the constant, unavoidable rhythm.
And the vision articulated is for this understanding and access to these kinds of supportive environments not to be a luxury or an experiment, but to become accessible, the norm for everyone.
So let's leave our listeners with a final thought to chew on, building on all this.
Okay, if this science holds true, if change really does become almost inevitable once the environment is properly structured, if the physics of the beam matters more than your finite daily willpower, then the really provocative question for you becomes, where in your own life right now are you perhaps hanging on a wrong beam, an environment that consistently pulls you away from where you want to go?
And related to that,
And how much precious energy, effort, and self-criticism are you currently pouring into that daily battle of willpower? Energy that could perhaps be redirected into the far more powerful, long-lasting strategy of consciously choosing or designing a better environment. The source suggests your environment isn't just where you live, it's the architect of your destiny. Where will you choose to hang your pendulum?